blurring the lines between real life and second life. Bringing you in-depth information about the people behind the avatars. Giving you insight like you've never heard before. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Fourth Wall with Paul and BK.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Fourth Wall. I am the scumbag superstar Paul Slater alongside my partner here, BK, and his lovely partner, Z. And BK, last week, that Fire Ember interview, we're getting a lot of feedback. Of people enjoyed the interview. What did you think about that last week, BK?
I was thrilled about it last week, and and I'm sure Z was too, because being the fact that we're not trying to be discriminative or anything, but it's the fact that it was like Jill of all trades, all those hats she wore, a female got to stand up first, and I was very excited that we were able to present that to her.
Yeah, I mean, it was a big insight on what she does and what all her responsibilities are in Premier Wrestling. But today, BK, we got somebody else who I feel, BK, is one of the most underappreciated members of the SL wrestling community. If you've seen any wrestling video on YouTube of SL wrestling, there's a good chance that our next guest is the guy who filmed it. Okay, he can't be here in our studio because he's having some issues, travel issues, whatever. He couldn't be here, but he's on our call with us, and we're going to talk today, and I'm talking about none other than the legendary cameraman, BK, Casey King.
Casey, can you hear us? Are you there?
Oh, yes, I can hear you very well.
Oh my God, this is the first time I've actually heard Casey talk. Usually he just types and says what he has to say, and then he's like, hey, I got to go edit the show, and he leaves.
Usually that's the case.
Right? Well, thank you, Casey, very much for agreeing to do this.
That's great. That's great. I mean, I'm English, so I hope you don't have a problem with the accents. But I mean, everybody in England has a regional accent, so
It's a lot easier to understand you than it is to understand Pafo.
See, I never have a problem with people's accents. I mean, UK accents have never been a problem. I mean, if you've ever talked to Jericho Scarbridge, I mean, who comes from the north of England, who's like from Newcastle or Sunderland, I'm sorry, and he's what we call a Geordie. And I mean, people, I think people have a problem with that accent, but I've never had a problem with accents. But yeah,
I never had a problem.
Do you have a problem understanding Sheamus when he does his promos?
No, not in the slightest. I never have a problem understanding anybody's accent, and I guess it's also because I understand different languages. And I mean, obviously, I live in Spain, so unless a person is like 80 or something and they kind of mumble a bit, I understand people in other languages. So I mean, not just Spanish. So no, I don't have a problem with the accent as long as the person speaks clearly. And I mean, obviously,
Right.
an older person.
That's an issue sometimes.
Right.
So, Casey, let's get down to it. Tell us about you growing up, how you found wrestling, how you found real life wrestling, how you got into wrestling. Tell us about that.
Okay, sure. Well, I started. I mean, I'm 65, so obviously I go back a lot further watching wrestling than I think most people in Second Life Wrestling. In fact, I would imagine now I'm probably the oldest person by about 10 years or whatever. I mean, I know there are some older people, but I guess I don't know if that's a good thing or not. It's probably not a good thing from my point of view because it means I'm older, but still. But anyway, so therefore my memories of wrestling, they go back a lot further, and obviously they come from a different point of view because until I was 45, I lived in England. So anything that I saw in England, and I started watching wrestling when I was about 8, and the wrestling that I watched back then, and of course TV was still in black and white, was, as you've probably heard of, called World of Sport. And you would have an hour of World of Sport every Saturday afternoon at 4. And wrestling, and this would have been like in the 60s or something. And wrestling was a really big deal in the UK, but it was tended to be something that it was thought of that older people watched, like grandmothers and things like that. And of course, in those days, it was different because people still were a long way from realizing that it wasn't real. Of
Right.
course, there were always people who swore blind. Oh, I know it's not real because this and this, and I know this wrestler. But there used to be a guy who used to comment on it. Who was a Canadian called Ken Walton, and I can tell you this was the most even now, I think this was the most believable wrestling that you would ever see. I mean, obviously now we've been used to there being no kayfabe for so many years now that we've gotten used to it. I mean, many people who watch wrestling now can't even remember a time where they never thought, or there was never a time where they didn't know that it wasn't real.
So
But
what?
back
Oh,
then, it
absolutely.
was.
So what
Absolutely. There was
was?
a point in time where, if you were, we didn't know them at that time, and like I said, Casey, you're, a few years ahead of me. But there was a period of time where, they didn't say heels and faces. It was always bad guys and good guys, or heroes and villains. There was a point in time where, even though they were friends backstage, they would not be seen anywhere because, baby faces didn't mingle with the heels and everything else, and
Kayfabe.
it wasn't. Yeah, yeah, it was all about kayfabe.
So what were
I
some of the
mean,
promotions, Casey? Like what? Like did you get the WWF there? Like what were some of the big promotions that are in England? Because I'm unfamiliar with like how over the pond is with the wrestling. I know there's catch wrestling and stuff like that over there. But what was like one of the bigger promotions in the UK when you were growing up?
well, there was only really I couldn't say how much independent wrestling there was. Probably not nowhere near as much as there is now. Because now, I mean, there are goodness knows how many promotions. Because wrestling has always been very popular in the UK. More so, of course, when it was on the TV. Now it hasn't been on on TV since, I don't know, the early '80s or something. I mean, a few years ago they tried to revive it, and they even had Wade Barrett on comms. But generally speaking, the TV company that showed it, which was one of the two main ones, they just decided that there wasn't the audience for it anymore,
Right.
and they stopped showing it. But you used to just get an hour a week, so the amount of it was so small that people would really look forward to it. I mean, now there are barely enough hours in the day to watch all of the wrestling that
Yeah.
you can see on TV. But
Right.
then it was literally 1 hour a week. You would have three matches, and that was it. And it was really treated like a really serious sport. I mean, if somebody broke the rules or something, it was it was a big deal. It was like a completely different sport. There were no people flying over the top rope or something, or what you would call flippy shit. Now, I mean, people just didn't go over outside the ring. I remember once when a very young Bret Hart went there and had a few matches. And of course, he was used to a different style, and he would go outside the ring or do a top rope move, and you would get what you called a public warning for that. You would have three public warnings, and people would actually get disqualified for breaking the rules.
I
I
remember
mean,
that. Yeah.
the idea of a wrestler now being disqualified is, although it's technically possible, it's absolutely unheard of.
Well, yeah.
it would just never happen. And I watch different wrestling in different countries like Japan and everything, and the same goes for any place that I watch wrestling. Nobody will ever get disqualified. I mean, I watched a match from New Japan the other week where the referee actually got speared by a wrestler who was pissed with him deliberately. He was speared deliberately. In no way was it made to look like an accident. He was speared. And I mean, and that guy never even got punished, disqualified. They never said he'd been fined or anything.
Games
And I mean,
changed.
I remember back in, way back in the day, like I said, Casey has admitted he's got a few years on us, but I'm talking about, in the 70s, that, if you went to do a top turnbuckle move, that was an automatic
Yep.
disqualification. Just like the
yes,
pile driver, even though the pile driver has now been outlawed, but at one particular time, the pile driver was, I mean, it that can't be used now because of all the safety measures. But back in the day, if you used it, that was disqualification. If you use, because that was one of Jerry Lawler's big things, was he used the pile driver. And it's just, and if you threw somebody over the top rope, that was an automatic disqualification. Now you're getting clothesline over the top rope almost every show, and you can see the evolution. I can get it, but it's like you need to bring back a little bit of the
Well,
old
I
root.
mean, if you watch a little bit of it now, I mean, I don't, I, I'm a Twitter wrestling follower now. I really don't watch the shows as much as I used to. Like some of them I watch, but you're starting to see like pile drivers and stuff like that come back. Not as much as like like what KC said, flippity shit on the top rope, but you're starting to see them implement a little bit of more like dangerous moves that were outlawed probably for the last 10 or so years. You're starting to come back a little bit now.
Yeah. All right, Casey. So your wrestling in real life got started at a very young age. You said 8 years old, and we've had conversations with you separately and collectively, Paul and I, and you've given us a little bit of background with you. So, first of all, how did you discover Second Life? How did you discover wrestling as Second Life? And what got you to, like Paul said earlier, we've known you as a camera person. Why did you never actually get involved in the actual wrestling aspect?
Well, first of all, as I have said, I've been in Second Life for about 8 or 9 years, um, and really, I sort of bounced around Second Life for about a year. I liked it. I thought it was great. But there was never really anything. I mean, a lot of people do the usual things in Second Life, and you know what I'm referring to. And I mean, I really wasn't into that because I'm not somebody who likes to role play or be a different character. Um, I'm basically just me, and I can't be any different. It would be the same if I was a wrestler. There is absolutely no way I could be a heel like Emma is doing now and do it, and let alone do it so well, even though it's probably a bit easier to be a heel, because it just doesn't gel with my character. I'm basically literally a good guy. You know, I treat people as I would like them to treat me, and I guess I come from a different generation. So I mean, like most of us, we get a lot of our character from our parents, and my parents were such good people, and I would like to think that I turn out the same way. So I couldn't like shit on anybody or anything. It just isn't in my nature. So I couldn't have done that. But what happened was, after I'd been in Second Life for about a year, I met Emma, and I just really wanted to make friends. In
Emma
all
Gray.
Yeah, Emma Gray. Yeah, in all honesty, and but of course, if you're going to make a really good any sort of friend or a really good friend that's going to last for years, like Emma and I have, you need to have a common interest. Because if you don't have a common interest, something that you're both really, really into, then you can't be friends without having conversations and having communication. And of course, Emma was as nuts about wrestling as I was, probably more so. And of course she comes from Northern Ireland and I came from the UK. So basically, we watched the same TV channels. So apart from the age difference, where Emma's kind of half my age or something like that, it's incredible how well we got on because we had the common ground of that we both loved wrestling. If anything, Emma watched more of it than me because the way that wrestling came in the UK, where you were able to watch it on TV, and I'm going to get onto the WWE now, is as I said, TV in the UK was in black and white up to about 1968. What happened was about 1990, you could get a satellite dish and put it on your house. You could fix it up yourself. It was just connected with a cable to the TV, and you had a set-top box. And for the first time ever, people were able to watch channels from Europe and maybe one or two other countries. And also and therefore there were channels like German channels where, for example, where you could watch wrestling from other countries. Now it wasn't you could watch wrestling that then they would show the WWE and WCF, WCW. No, they didn't show it live. They would like show an hour of a show or something like that. They would show highlights. And there was a channel that you eventually paid for called Sky Sports in the UK. Although for 2 or 3 years it was free, and they used to show the WWE, and as far as I can recall from the beginning, they used to show it live. And but you eventually it wasn't free. You had to subscribe to it. So once you had to subscribe to it, I never watched it after that. But Emma did. Emma always watched it. So basically, Emma really never stopped watching it. Whereas I kind of drifted away from watching the WWE. It wasn't that it wasn't better than what I watched. It was just something that I needed to pay to watch. So I used to watch a German channel, and the German channel used to show WCW. So what I really watched during the 90s was WCW. And like I said, it's not that it was better, it was just what was there basically. Um, and so I watch. I used to sit and watch. They're like pleasant memories because, like most of your guests have said so far, they would sit and watch it with their parents or their father or something. I would sit and watch it with my father. So there are very pleasant memories there. Then stuff happened over the years where I didn't watch it any. I sort of watched it sporadically. I lost my parents in 2000 and 2004. I don't have any more family, and I moved to Spain, and I retired to Spain because I had health problems, and after 40, I haven't worked since I was 45. After that, once I lost them, I don't have any other family, so I came to live in Spain, and I brought the satellite dish with me and fixed it up. And by then, there used to be a channel that showed not the WWE, but it used to show ring. It used to show on. They used to have a specific wrestling channel, and they used to show Ring of Honor. And the thing that I really watched after that was Ring of Honor. And Ring of Honor was extremely well written, and it was extremely
From Philly.
believable.
Ring of Honor's from Philly, where I'm from. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it was like kind of like when I first used to watch wrestling. It was really well written. You could believe it. You could suspend. Obviously, by now we knew it. I mean, during WCW, it became perfectly obvious that it wasn't real. But we probably continued to believe longer than most people because you believe what you want to believe, and if you want to believe that what you're watching is real, then obviously you'll get more enjoyment out of it. So for the longest time, me and my father, we put off believing that it wasn't real. But eventually, it gets to the stage where you simply can't ignore it. And some of the stupid shit they used to do in WCW with Vince Russo and so on, everybody knows it just got too ridiculous. So you get to the stage where you're thinking, why am I even wasting more time watching this? You know. But Ring of Honor, on the other hand, was extremely well written. The quality of wrestling was incredibly high. It was believable. It made it easy to suspend disbelief. And it was written by somebody who I've always thought was very, very talented, Gabe Sapolsky for
Yep.
the most part. And of course, people know Ring of Honor because of all the great wrestlers who came from it, like Brian Danielson. And it's amazing how many of those
I
people are
went.
still around today.
I think it was 2005. I went to a Ring of Honor show because Ring of Honor started a little bit after ECW closed down. It started in Philly.
Yeah,
They had all their stuff was at the ECW arena, which a lot of people don't remember, like realize. But I went to a show back then. It was like 2005, and it was Tyler Black, who's Seth Rollins. It was Brian Danielson was there. He was actually the American Eagle or something like that. Like he wasn't Brian or Daniel Bryan or Brian Danielson. He was like the American Eagle or something like that. I forget what his name was. CM,
Dragon. He was,
yeah, American
he was
Dragon.
the American
CM Punk
Dragon.
was
Yeah.
there. I seen CM Punk, Samoa Joe, and like when you go to them shows at that time, it's 2005. I don't know any of these guys, so it's just like you're like watching kind of like at the time you're like, oh, I'm watching these nobodies. You know what I mean? But then you realize like 5 years later, I'm like, holy shit, like these guys are in like the big thing. So let me go. Let me just run you back a little ahead, Casey. You and Emma basically shared a common interest in wrestling, and Emma the one that got you into the wrestling and into the SL wrestling?
Well, it happened about the same time, to be honest. I believe Emma had done a little bit of post ball wrestling, so she wasn't entirely unfamiliar with it. But of course, it's one thing doing post ball and another thing doing it with a
Yeah.
HUD. It's far more realistic, and it takes a fair bit more effort. So anyway, Emma, I think, progressed from that and wanted to try. And I can't remember if she realised or not the other thing existed. I don't think she did. I think I asked her about it the other day. In one way or another, she discovered it. Excuse me. And then so she decided she was going to try doing that. And I said okay. So I went to watch it with her, and I'm trying to think what the first thing was that she started with. It would have been Josh Poffos probably. I think no, it was. I think right at the beginning, it was Josh Poffos fed BCW in one of its various incarnations. Probably the first time he ever really started it, because I mean, Josh has been around for many, many years, and he's actually probably a bit younger than most people might imagine. Because I mean, there are still a few people in Second Life who like have been there since they were 14 or something like that, and I
Yeah.
think Josh is somebody like that. So, and you kind of think of them as being like 40 or something because they've been around for years. But the fact is, they're still not really all that old. But anyway, as far as I can recall, she was in BCW, and she was trained by somebody who isn't around now, although they popped up a couple of years ago. And I don't think she had the best trainer, to be honest with you. Where Emma, I believe, learned more than anything was simply in having matches against the person who trained her, against other people, and I think that's the way that anybody in Second Life Wrestling really learns. I think the first person who trains them gets them used to the HUD and everything else,
Yeah.
but I think you can't replace having matches, and particularly having matches against different people in different feds, and writing the matches, and that's where you improve. So obviously Emma improved, and Emma went to, well, she was still wrestling in BCW. She would have wrestled anywhere basically because
So
she
did
just
you
loved
start
to do it.
filming? Is that how you started filming? You
Yeah,
started filming Emma's
yeah.
matches? Yeah.
Yeah. So what happened was, I said to Emma, well, I got some software called Camtasia, and it was a trial version. And you could do everything with it. The only thing you had a faint watermark on it, and if anybody looks at one of my few early videos, which I can never find myself, quite honestly, you can still see the watermark on it. So I did this for actually 3 or 4 months, and I said to Emma, it would be cool if I recorded every match that you have, for however long you do this. And Emma was obviously happy with it. Um, and I said, like, we follow your progress or whatever. So I started to do that. I would also maybe record one or two of the other matches. And Emma joined VAW. And they had two shows, as people have mentioned before, Turbulence and I think it was Elite. Turbulence was kind of like the SmackDown, I suppose. It was like the blue and red brand, and maybe Turbulence was probably the second show, if you like, because Elite used to be on at about 2 in the morning my time, and the other one used to be on about 8, and in the evening. And I don't know how it happened that Emma got to book it in the finish, but I presume Vince Aftermath or somebody or whoever made up their mind. It might have been Trace Steel Legendary. They must have seen that Emma knew what she was doing, so they actually let Emma book Turbulence. And of course, because it was a secondary show for VAW, they kind of got the leftovers that VAW wasn't using, quite honestly. Um, but nevertheless, and you also had a lot of people where Emma used to have something that she did regularly, used to be on a Thursday night. So a lot of the time, Emma didn't even know if she would get back from this in time to even do it. And by the time Emma got back about an hour before the show, you would literally have had people drop out of the show already. So you would have to like change things on the fly, and I suppose it was good experience. But Emma is really really good at booking. I mean, this is something that Emma isn't going to say, but I'm going to say Emma is really really good at booking. I mean, Emma booked this, and it was really really good. And then the amount of wrestlers that she to actually use that's an absolute minimum because, like I said, it was the second show.
Yeah.
And as we went along, I not only recorded Emma's matches, I recorded a few other people's, until eventually I was recording most of it, still with this trial software, and I enjoyed it that much, and I learned to edit a bit, within the confines of the
Hmm.
software, which incidentally I'm still using now. But it was quite expensive then. It was like £200 or something, like $200
Yeah, it's expensive. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, and even now, anything that's worth having, yeah, you can get a free one probably, but they will never do everything that
No.
something that you pay for does
And it's
because
hard.
that's
I
why you.
mean, I've filmed a few things, in my time, and it's not easy.
No, no, no,
Well,
no.
you know,
It's
what I was going to say is that you were talking about coming in and being able to record the shows. Before I knew you as recording the shows, there was a person avatar in Second Life called Camera Kitty. Did
Yes,
you ever
camera
did
kids.
Yes, Camera
I
Kitty.
know.
Did you
I
did
know.
uh did you ever like collaborate with her or anything on what you did? And I know eventually she
No,
stepped away and you kind of took over, but was that a plan or is it just something that kind of happened?
no, because Camera Kitty is, I think, I don't know how many different places Camera Kitty is recorded. I know Camera Kitty still, I believe she still records WPWF. Um, I think she's done stuff before then because I've literally gone back and looked at the history of Second Life Wrestling because it's been around a long time, like nearly as long as Second Life, and it interests me to see not only the people that I've seen wrestling, but the people before that. Because I mean, there was a fed called Hawks, as you know, um,
I
and
remember
and a
Hawks.
few of the people who were in Hawks, not much of Hawks survives too much on YouTube now. Anyway, what I decided to do, to come back to a question you probably asked about 20 minutes ago, I
You're all right.
decided I having looked on YouTube for old Second Life Wrestling, and there was a bit here and a bit there, and the odd match from different feds and this sort of thing, and there is a bit of Hawks on there, and by all accounts of everybody who was in Hawks, Hawks was absolutely awesome, and there were quite a few people when I began, at least, who were still wrestling, who long after Hawks had finished, and most of them were wrestling in DCWF, and I thought it's such a pity that these people put in so much effort, and are so good at what they do. And remember, years ago, you didn't have the choice of moves that you would get now if you went somewhere to buy a move. They would literally have to make up matches from like a dozen moves or whatever. So it required more imagination and more invention. I mean, now you can literally any move you see a wrestler do on the TV, you could probably, if you're
Yeah.
prepared to pay the linen, you can literally go and buy that move. But then, you really had to vary things in the match because you were using the same move sometimes. I've been back and looked. You really had to use your imagination, and that's probably why the best people who were ever the second life wrestlers who were ever the best ones, who were sort of still around just about when we began watching it, were the best ones and were the ones who did it for the longest because they were the most inventive ones. And it's a pity that a lot of and inevitably a lot of those people aren't around before, and it's a shame. But by the same token, a lot of them are. So anyway, I saw how little Second Life Wrestling remained on YouTube. I mean, obviously on YouTube it's always going to be there because I don't think anything on YouTube is ever going to disappear. Hopefully, otherwise the last 8 years of work I've put in are useless. But I thought it's such a pity. It's such a pity that
So
a lot of these people will never have some of their best work, some of their best matches will never be recorded because everybody wants to be a wrestler.
yep.
Nobody wants to be the person who's sitting there commentating, or
Well, I don't
even
know
or
about
even.
that, Casey. Commentating.
I mean,
I
come
mean,
on, you're talking to the two best.
Yeah, come on, Casey.
I mean, I am
You
actually.
you
That's what
noticed
we're.
us commentating. That's how you met us.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I decided to not only record Emma, every match that Emma did, but as much as I could. So like entire shows. So I think I was more or less recording the entirety of
So
Turbulence.
that was the
Emma
first
had a
show. Oh, go ahead,
yeah,
Casey. I'm sorry.
yeah.
That was the
Emma
first show
had a
you actually filmed. Was Turbulence? You said.
yes,
Okay.
yes, yes. I never recorded Elite because Elite was at like two a.m. my time. So it was even back then there was no way I was staying up till 2 a.m. to do it. So anyway, I just restricted my. I think Emma would occasionally appear on Elite, but Emma like most people, hopefully, works full time, and you simply can't stay up till 2 a.m. when you go to work at 8 or 9 in the morning. But generally, Emma was appearing on Turbulence, and booking Turbulence, and I'll say again, incredibly well. Um, and then we discovered. I mean, we were as green as anything. We didn't know anybody who was a legend who'd been around for years. We didn't know shit. We didn't know anybody like in DCWF or anything else. I remember. I remember us once doing a charity show, and Emma had somebody called Kendra Chemistry, who I don't think is around anymore, and there was a wrestler on that bill who really to me is my favourite wrestler probably ever, called Horses Morrissey. You probably wouldn't
Oh
be
my
Yeah, we
God, I
remember
haven't heard that name in years.
Fusion.
yeah, well,
Fusion.
Wow.
she finally finished about 2 years ago. Although I think her retirement tour went on forever. But we started to go and just watch DCWF. And I used to go really just to watch Horses Morrissey, because Horses Morrissey was just the funniest thing I've ever seen. She really, really got it. I mean, this character could have been a character on TV. One day I'll have to do. But Horses Morrissey, to give you an example, had that many shows, but DC and that did that many great matches, that many great promos. Horses was more funny with promos and the character than the matches.
Yeah.
Um, but DCWF were never bothered about anybody recording their shows, which I always found really strange. They would have their big show of every year, and they were never bothered about. We're not going to talk about who ran it or whatever. I mean, he doesn't. He's finished now. But I could never understand why you wouldn't want anybody to record your show every week if they were prepared to do it, or at the very least, the best show. So I think I recorded like every one of their main shows that they ever had, and if I hadn't done it, nobody else would have done. So it just seemed like a shame. So
So
I
you
with
did. I
that,
mean, you basically did it on your own. Like you seen an opening that nobody. There's a market. Like as far as an open market here, nobody's recording this. You want to put it on YouTube and like give the people on that cell something to go back to. They go back and watch, and they go back and check it out. So you seen that. And you just went on, like you just did it on your own. Like nobody said, "Hey, we need a film. We need a cameraman to film or whatever." You just did it.
I literally did this. I mean, I simply started the YouTube channel to put Emma's matches on, because that's you had to put them somewhere, and that's where I put them. And I thought, years to come, maybe when Emma doesn't do this anymore, um, Emma can go back and look at it. And then I thought, well, the same applies to all these other people, for like Horses Morrissey, for example. Not everybody will be bothered one way or another, but I would like to think that one day they'll go back and see what they did that was so good, and it deserves to be remembered. And maybe I don't know, maybe they can show it to the kids or whatever. But
Right.
it's like a memory. It's like having a lot of old photographs of when you were young or your parents or something. And I
Absolutely.
thought there was so much good stuff on there that would never have been recorded, because, like I said, most people didn't. There was never anybody who wanted to do that. I think Camera Kitty was probably the only one. I think Camera Kitty used to record Hawks as well. So Camera Kitty was literally it. I'm still friends with her on Facebook, but we don't really talk much. But yeah, I think there was just Camera Kitty. So there was Camera Kitty and me, and Camera Kitty. The last for most of the time I was recording Second Life Wrestling has just done WPWF and done it extremely well.
That's
So,
interesting.
Okay, so let's
so I decided to get the. Basically, I knew I wasn't going to stop doing this, so I bought the full version of the software. So basically, all that meant was that we got rid of the watermark, and I was ready to go. I started, hopefully, to make a better job of it. So obviously, I started to do things like wrestlers didn't have tags when they were wrestling, because that looked horrible. Um, and I decided I began to add another thing that was missing from Second Life Wrestling was nobody ever seemed to put crowd noise on. And I mean, wrestling without a crowd is nothing really. And of course, there were never more than back then or even now. Um, there were never more than about 10 people watching it. So you had to make it sound to a casual person looking on YouTube, you had to make it seem more like, obviously
Real.
they make the comparison with what they watch on TV, and what they watch on TV doesn't happen in total silence, unless maybe you're at some AEW show occasionally. So, and I do like AEW incidentally, just not as much now. So I started to add the crowd noise, which people even now don't seem to be too bothered. I mean, there are gestures that people can use, but most of the time, if there's somebody isn't doing a gesture, it's just in silence. And to me, it just sounds absolutely horrible. So I started to add crowd noise. Sometimes people do chants, okay, but they don't do them that much. So I've got a collection of chants and things, and I would add them in the appropriate places to make it more interesting. And what I was trying to do basically was and I didn't record and I never have recorded like anybody else because the general Second Life way of recording things, wrestling, if people ever do it, is that they kind of like do it more in an artistic way. The
Right.
camera's floating around it and so on and so on and so forth. And that's fine. Some people do it better than others. Sometimes it's as long as they don't overdo it, that's fine. But I have a few not mental problems, like more problems with my eyes where I can't take that sort of thing. I can't take people jump cuts and things like when you have adverts on the TV. I can't watch things where they keep cutting and that. They're
Right.
like the Kevin Dunn approach to WWE. So I decided I never did that. As far as I was concerned, the camera was still on the
Yeah,
side.
you had your own
Um,
style.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I didn't do it like anybody else because I'm never going to copy anybody else. I do it my way. So my way, I would think, was probably more realistic in terms of what people watched on the TV. You had the crowd noise, you had the crowd chants, um, and that was it. And I, to this day, I still do that. The only way in which it's changed is now I don't like having the ropes in the way, so I'm more likely to film it from the corner. That's the only thing. But I don't like to do more camera cuts than necessary. I mean, if I can avoid doing a camera cut, I will. But that's
Good,
basically
BK.
old habits die hard, as they say. That's how I did it, and that's basically still how I still do it. I haven't changed, and I would like to think I've got better. But I mean, obviously, if you're using the same software for 8 years, you are going to get better. And like I said before, it's too expensive, and it's not worth it now. Anyway, as time progressed, Emma and I went. Well, obviously, we were mostly in the same feds, and apart from a couple of exceptions, I was always recording Emma's matches. But eventually, I began actually working for the Fed and wearing the tag and everything. Funnily enough, I never actually officially worked for DCWF. They just let me. I progressed to recording their entire shows, um, and because I enjoyed it. Apart from OEW at the finish, which I think was the best way I could possibly finish, because I always said it isn't going to get better than OEW, quite honestly. And I always said from about halfway in, when once I know that like everything else, OEW will eventually end because everything I've ever been in it, they usually last. I always said they usually last about a year, and that's
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
basically it.
you basically, I mean, we ain't BK. Do you have something you want to say, BK? I know you want to say something.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna tell. Actually, I was gonna put KC on the spot here because we're gonna do some mixing of RL and SL together here.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not gonna do a rapid fire with you, but short, quick answers because I got a lot of them. Okay.
Yeah.
Number one, favorite RL wrestler of all time.
Ah, Punk. I love Punk. Absolutely love
Okay.
Punk. That's why I wear
Okay.
so many. Yeah, everything basically.
Okay.
But there are so many Brian Danielson people. A lot of people who were in Ring of Honor because that was the thing, probably the wrestling show on TV that I enjoyed the most. But a lot of people even now are still around, and but Punk, because
Okay.
Punk also shares some of my beliefs. Um,
o-
and that obviously I identify with him because of that. But
Okay. Okay. Favorite RL female wrestler.
uh, well, I'm not really into female wrestling, to be honest with
Oh,
you.
whoa, whoa, whoa!
No.
You you're
Because
no,
well,
oh, you're
yeah,
not allowed to
yeah.
say that because you've been sitting here talking for about 45, almost 45 minutes, and I hear Emma come out of your mouth a lot. And to say that you
Yeah.
don't really watch
But
female
I have
wrestling, oh, come on.
I haven't finished the answer, which is on the
Okay,
TV. On the
okay,
TV. In
okay.
in Second Life, on the
I
other
didn't ask
hand,
second. I
I
didn't ask second
I
life. I said real
I
life.
I prefer I absolutely prefer women wrestling in Second
Oh,
Life because it doesn't. If I watch real life wrestling and it's women's wrestling, it doesn't. And obviously no one is really hitting one another. I like women too much that it doesn't really give me a lot of pleasure to see them even kayfabe fighting or whatever. But in Second Life, women's wrestling has always been they've always been smaller. Sometimes men wrestling in Second Life gets to the stage of who's going to be, maybe not now so much, but certainly for the first few years, it gets like which guy's going to have the biggest avatar, who's going to have who's going to be the biggest badass. So it's like real wrestling in the 80s. It evolves into a situation where it's just big guys hitting one another. You know what I mean? There are no moves on
now,
top rope
now,
moves.
now, hold
So
on.
in second,
Now, hold on. My avatar, I'm 6'10", and I've come off the top rope.
yeah, yeah, I'm not saying it never happens. It probably more as real life wrestling's changed.
Okay, all right.
People have and more moves have been made. Now there are more, and obviously real life wrestling's changed where you'll get bigger wrestlers doing moves that they would never have got done like 20 years ago. I mean,
Well,
you'll get some.
The Undertaker started all
Yeah,
that with his
yeah.
old
I mean,
school and his leaping clothesline that he did. Undertaker started all that.
almost literally now, any move that any smaller guy like 180 pounds or whatever does, really a bigger wrestler will do it now. Is it a good thing? I don't know it, but what it does, it's minimizing how impressive the moves are because you've got these big guys like, let's say Keith Lee, for example. You had somebody the size of Keith Lee, like diving through doing a tope or something through the ropes, and and somebody like Big E or something like that in the WWE, um, and it kind of shits on the smaller guys in a way, but it's what happens. It's the way wrestling's evolved. So this is filtered down to Second Life Wrestling, where now these moves are being made, and now people with really big. I'm not talking about tall avatars so much. I'm talking about really big. Really big avatars are doing it, or really big people in Second Life. And everybody does everything now essentially. But since women wrestlers are even in Second Life are generally more on the smaller side, it's always completely believable for them to do any of these moves that they can buy basically.
That makes sense.
O- Okay,
What else you
so
got, BK?
now,
Keep hitting them with fire questions.
oh, I'm trying to here. So we got your favorite male RL wrestler, and you were honest about the real life female wrestling and whatnot. So now let's cross over. You mentioned earlier that there was a whole bunch of people that that you got to watch, and I'm sure some of them, including myself, you got to watch and develop. Who would you say is the answer? There is no right or wrong answer. Who would you say? And we already know the answer about the female, so I'm not even going to ask you that one. But who would you say if somebody said, "Hey, who?" I'm asking, who is your favorite of all time SL male
Uh,
wrestler?
that is a very hard one because I have seen so many. Because I've been in like I've recorded like every Fed, to be honest with you, and usually with them at the same time. Um, so the number of wrestlers I've seen is, you know, and obviously at the beginning I didn't really appreciate who was really good and who wasn't. It was only when I got into editing it more that I started to study it a bit more, because every show and every match that I recorded, my way was that I would watch the entire thing again, because sometimes, unfortunately, with the camera I fuck up and I have to do an edit. So
Oh,
therefore, I go through the a lot, because if I do it, it's got to be perfect, or as perfect as I can make it without spending a
okay,
day doing it. So
okay,
to answer your question, the the people I would say, first of all, the person that's most impressed that I've really liked over the years is Basil Windlow. I think
Yeah.
Basil Windlow is absolutely next level, because Basil Windlow is absolutely he's obsessed with how good he is with his gear, with his moves, with everything. He is a perfectionist, and because of how much effort he's put into it, that to me makes him the best. And if we
okay.
were talking. Um, I mean, but there are more. I mean, it depends a lot more. But I
Okay,
think
well, I
the
mean,
people,
like I said, everybody's got their favorites, and somebody's gonna say, "Well, that's
and
not
I
my
can
favorite,"
only
but it's a personal opinion.
and I can only speak for the person in the feds that I've recorded. I mean,
Right.
because the only fed I've never recorded is VWE. Sometimes I have seen people from VWE either in charity shows or, as in the case of FPW, for a while we had quite a few people from VWE wrestling there as well, although usually not for very long. Um, um, but yeah, bars are Winlow, but there are so many. It depends on how you judge the best. But I mean, there are a lot of people who are good. But bars, I would say bars are Winlow, quite honestly.
Okay.
And not only a great wrestler, but a really nice guy as well.
Okay.
You know,
Um, and all the time that you've been recording, you get to watch storylines develop. And I know for a fact that you were actually in a storyline one time because Paul mentioned that in in one of our previous episodes where you got to cut. He calls it the man bun. Z and I call it the twat knot. You got to cut his little bun thing off. Other
that
than the
wasn't what I
story,
was. That wasn't what I was
do it.
thinking about it. I was thinking about the thing that happened before that in that storyline.
That was a
Well,
fun
what I'm
story.
saying, what I'm saying is that you got to be part of that storyline. And yes, we all want, every
Yeah.
wrestler, I don't care who you are, will sit there and say, well, my storyline has been the most fun, but they'll come out and say, well, the storyline that I did with this person, the storyline I did with this person was the most fun, or we, tried things never tried before. Out of all,
Yeah.
and I know there's a lot of storylines you've seen, there's a lot of editing you've done, you've watched a lot of wrestling. Is there any storyline that stands out to you as saying that's the one that if somebody was to ask me if my favorite, that would be the one that I refer to?
Well, first of all, in a way, this is easy because the only, despite how many feds I've recorded, the only one that I can recall that ever really made any effort at having storylines was OEW, and that was because of Paul, basically. I always like to think of Paul not only sharing the same name as Paul Heyman. I always kind of think of Paul like like Paul Heyman, like the mad scientist, because obviously Paul used to watch the original ECW. Bit
Yep.
of ass kissing here.
Mm-hmm.
Paul used to actually watch the original, unlike all the people who said they used to go and would have been like three when it was going. Paul actually went there. I know he lived around the corner, and he went there and
Yep.
he absorbed not only what was happening and the atmosphere, and of course it was booked by Paul Heyman, who like I said, they called him the mad scientist. The way he did everything was never like anybody else. I know he would have one match running into another and do stuff like that. He wanted to do something different, and that's what Paul does. So, bearing in mind, Paul books a lot of OEW, as he was there for most of the time for 4 years. We had some great storylines. Because Paul understands wrestling. So what comes to mind are obviously I enjoyed that I was able to get in the ring and kick him in the nuts. I mean that was great. That was great. And also,
Hey,
and also and
Don't forget Z got to slap him too.
it was
Well, let me talk about that. So I we met.
well,
We
Well,
I
hold on.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Let Casey go ahead and talk
Yeah, go
about what
ahead.
his favorite storyline is, and you can pick it up.
Oh yeah, you're right.
yeah, all right, yeah. There was that, and obviously I'd forgotten about the shaving his hair off as well. So obviously, from my point of view, that was fun because I had actually been in the ring before. Josh Poffo let me win a meaningless battle royal we had once in Kingdom of Wrestling, and that was fun because I was the cameraman, and all I did was come in right at the end when Josh was like on the top rope or something, getting ready to win. I think he was the last guy in there, and then here comes the cameraman, and I just run up the steps, get in the ring,
Push him
and I
off.
managed to do a drop kick successfully, and he's eliminated. So I actually won I actually won that
Nice.
fight, and that
Nice.
was so really. I had literally done something else before.
Okay.
So
And
when I used to record after that, I used to have the camera position in the center on the far, where the end where people usually stand. As I have done, and I would stand there, and I had my camera position, and I would have the trophy next to me, and I made a nameplate for it and everything, and it was just funny. Um, but the actual storyline that I really enjoyed, and as I've said, they've all been in OEW because nobody really has ever really bothered with storylines. I think Emma, to be honest, coming back to Emma, I think Emma's tried, but it's difficult when you're making a show with like half a dozen people to even have a storyline. Quite honestly, you just don't have enough people to.
Yeah.
And she had people who wouldn't even turn up half the time, so that doesn't exactly help because how can
Well,
you
that
do a
was
storyline?
that. I mean, in OEW, I can speak just from experience. The hardest thing about OEW is, I mean, we had such a small roster, so it was
At the
always
beginning,
trying. Yeah, well, in the second term of it, like I'm not talking about when it started, but when the second version, as they call it, of OEW, we had a small roster. So like when I kind of started creating storylines and stuff, it was like trying to find things that were fresh because in some cases the same guys would have to maybe have a feud for a cycle, go with somebody else, and probably most likely sometimes come back to that other person they were just there. So you had to think of something different. So that was a challenge because it's such a small roster. But I'm going to say this though, and this is tooting KC's horn, and I told BK this, and even when me and you, even when you and I wrote storylines together, BK, it was always like KC will like this. We always wrote for KC.
thank you,
Yeah, we
thank you.
actually, we actually did. We
That
actually.
is a compliment. Yeah,
Well, the whole thing is that where Paul and even and Z can attest to this because she knew how excited Paul and I were about it. But back in the first run of OEW when Insidious showed up, and it was the storyline with Hal, and we threw that swerve,
that's
and we threw that
that
and we
is
threw that
that
swerve
is
in
the one.
there.
That is the one, and I've said this to Paul
And-
before. That is the one because it usually in second life wrestling, if anybody even attempts a storyline, it's going to be probably more predictable than anything you would have seen in the WWE years ago. Now, not so much because it's so much better, but then yeah. But this one, you literally had me because it even fooled me when Paul
but
turned in it because I really thought Paul was going to manage Al Jackson
right,
and
and
then
that's it.
Paul was being a face basically,
Yeah.
and making it work. And
Hmm.
and I mean, I've seen that much stuff in Second Life over 8 years in Second Life wrestling, but you can usually guess, quite honestly. And because you work in the Fed, you hear little things and have little hints from people, but not
Yeah,
from Paul
we
because
kept that. We
Paul
kept
doesn't
that.
Paul doesn't
We
tell
kept.
Paul doesn't
We
tell you
kept.
shit, to be honest.
We kept that. We kept that one under basically Fort Knox lock and key because
Yeah,
we wanted nobody to know anything. And while we're writing this, and this, honest to God, while we're writing this and going over it, Paul's like, Casey's gonna flip his shit.
Yeah.
Casey is gonna
yeah,
flip his shit. Casey's gonna love this. And
I did.
then that happened, and unfortunately that was short lived. And then we did the storyline that you actually helped to embellish. I know you've heard. I know you heard us talk about this one. When did the whole comeback and did the whole. I feel like somebody's watching me,
Yeah.
and Paul was telling me about some IMs that some
Yeah,
communication
KC.
that was going on
Yeah.
between you two. That you told him that I friended you, and you wanted to make sure it was okay because you had no idea what our state of mind
No,
towards
I
each
did.
other was.
No, I didn't. No, I had another clue. Because once people go, I don't know. I mean, people fall out. Some people fall out every day in Second Life wrestling. Quite
Yeah,
honestly, you get. I mean, and I didn't know the history. I knew you had been friends. Whether you still were friends, I don't know.
uh,
I don't know. I don't know the end of it because nobody talks about it.
yeah. And then it
They
was
generally do. They generally do, but Paul, like I said, you never get shit out of Paul. Sometimes I fish, and I've
well,
given up now. And
well,
I've
that was
given
by
up. I've
design.
I
given
was
up now.
very I was very secretive in OEW.
Well, and we even went as far as to make sure that nobody knew that I was actually making the return that day because Z didn't even go to the shows until after I got into the ring and Paul kind of freaked out and ran. If you go back and you actually look, Z's not even at the show because that's how much detail we put into it. We wanted nobody to get it because hey, if Z's here, BK's here.
Well,
So
the
that's why you never saw her show up until that face to face shoot promo that we did. She showed up that day.
the storyline go back to the one that KC was involved in. So how that happened was I was in the storyline. It was like I think it was like 2 years ago, and it was with Tiesa. Tiesa was in OEW. She was the OEW executive vice president or VP or
Was
whatever.
that your whole power struggle thing?
Well, yeah. So how it started was I would come out and do promos, and I kind of got me and Casey always had history as like we're in Fusion OEW, and I would always
Right.
like say things to him, especially when I came back to OEW. I would always say, KC, you're filming this. Make sure you get the best side of me, and I would never tell him what side was the best side, and every week I would complain about it. And then So
It
the-
never ended.
so the whole storyline
Trying
was.
to get that poor man to look at your ass.
Yeah, well, I never said. I'm like,
Right.
KC, you get that camera, you make sure you film the right side and not the wrong side of the scumbag superstar. So,
Paul, you were lucky that when I'm recording, I'm concentrating, and apart from before or after the match, I really can't type anything in chat because I'm
I
recording.
know.
I'm concentrating too much, I've often wished I could have some comeback or something, but I've tried it and it's no good. It distracts me
Yes.
because I may have ADHD or whatever. But in any case,
But
I
the
can only
funny,
do one thing at once, and that one thing is recording it to the best of my ability.
but
So unfortunately, it's kind of one-sided. But anyway,
the funny story about it was though, the whole storyline was basically Tiesa. I thought Tiesa was doing such an awful job that I was going to throw my hat into the candidacy to be the new vice president because it was like election time. It was like 2022. It was like the election was coming up or whatever, and we talked about it. Me and Tiesa. So we talked about how we were going to do it. So I'm sitting here the one night and I'm writing a story out and I'm like kind of at a roadblock and I'm like, man, how am I going to do this? So the whole idea was I knew how I was going to get to where I was going to win and I was going to become the vice president of OEW. And I'm like, you know what? I'm like, the first thing I'm going to do as vice president is fire KC. Like, that's how I'm going to do it. So then I wrote a thing and I'm like, well, I can't fire him because he has to film it. But I'm going to basically, I'm going to make him come to the ring. I'm going to kick him in the nuts because for the last 6 or 7 weeks, he's been filming the wrong side of me. And we got to get the cameraman on the right to make sure I'm filmed at the best possible angle as possible. So that's how it started. I kicked him and then I was like a tyrant for a few weeks. And I'm like, how can I end this? Because we figured out how to end it. I'm like, who better than to come down and get the retribution to cut my twat and I, whatever you want to call it, off that I've had since I started. Than Casey King. That's how that all came about. Getting Casey that. And also it's like I knew, doing Fusion and doing OEW and doing all the things, like Casey was like, it's a thankless job filming. No one, like, I never seen people leave the arena or anything. He's like, hey, thank you, KC, or whatever. So I'm like, let's get KC some, let's get him some shine and put him on there. Like, just more of appreciate everything you do. As far as look, let's get you involved because you're the biggest part, one of the biggest part of the shows because you're filming us, And I always felt that you never got your, you never got to many of the the accolades that you should have had, as far as getting your flowers for doing all the things that you've done for SL Wrestling because you're a huge. I mean, you look at it. I know I'm getting a little long-winded here, but. You have you mentioned earlier about I wanted to I put on YouTube page so people can go back and watch and see stuff. But not only that, but you have new people. There's many people that I talk to who are new that have come to me for, hey man, I've asked me for advice or whatever. Not that I'm the best person to give advice to. I haven't been here as long as BK or anybody else, but. If you have something like, hey man, go back and watch BK matches. Go back and watch David Hawk actor matches. They're on this YouTube page. You know what I mean? You have that. It's like an outlet of where people who want to learn about SL Wrestling can go back to this huge library that you built to look at all these people and see how good that they became and see how much improved they got after each match and each match. So you did a huge service for this whole SL Wrestling community by just opening that page, Casey.
This is what I wanted to do. I wanted the majority of it to be presented well or to the best of my ability with not stuff that was 10 years old or something. I wanted it to be done the best it could be But what I wanted most of all is for it to all be in one place.
Right.
So we just went from me just recording one person to recording entire feds. And there were times where I was recording 2 feds a week, and it just got too much, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a lot.
And it's in a way, it's why I finished it in the end, because I can't stop up late because my eyes would be sore for 2 or 3 days. And I had to leave. I had to leave BCW because of that at the finish. It was my second time there, which was a shame. But I said to Josh, I can't do this after 11 o'clock at night, Josh. And of course, OEW came along, and it was at the perfect time for me because it was like 6 o'clock for me. And OEW was so good, and I'll blow your trumpet because it literally was. And I thought, well, this is literally the best Fed I've ever recorded. I thought I'm never going to be anywhere better than this, and I was never anywhere longer than that because nowhere ever lasts. Like I said earlier, nowhere ever lasts for about longer than about a year. I think I did recorded DCWF for about 2 or 3 years, but again, I wasn't officially there. They just allowed me to do it, or anybody really. But I was obviously a part of OEW with the tag and whatever. And I thought, it's never going to get better than this. So once this finishes, and like I said, I was getting problems with sore eyes and things. I thought, that's it. I've done it for 8 years. That's enough. The only thing I will do and so if probably I would have finished at the end of this year. I don't know. I guess I would have carried on because I know nowhere, no matter how good it seems, it nowhere ever, nothing lasts forever. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
And I had no idea, not even an inkling that OEW was going to close. So or Emma, or anybody, I don't think. So it was a complete shock. But really, as bad as it was, he came at the right time for me. Because to be honest with you, I had had enough, and after that, that was going to be it anyway. And I think 4 years is a damn good time for a Fed to last in Second Life Wrestling.
Yeah, it was a
Quite
good run.
honestly. And I had the most fun I've ever had anywhere, and and recorded the best stuff ever, probably that I've ever done. So, I decided, to just go back to watching it like Emma and I did at the beginning, but I've never intended to not record Emma's matches because we started something and we're going to carry on until one day if Emma can't do it anymore. But I see no sign that Emma's going to stop because Emma loves it so much. And now, of course, Emma has turned heel. So Emma's got a whole new lease of life now. And Emma is really good at promos and stuff as well. The voice
Okay,
thing doesn't make.
so Emma turned heel. I don't know if you're aware of this, but did you know that there was actually a plan in OEW that Paul and I were actually going to finally be able to form the creed that we tried to start in FPW, and Emma was supposed to have been a part of that?
Yeah, I know you were going to have a faction. I, I,
Yeah,
I, I, I
it
didn't
was going to
really
be
remember that you were,
it was going
that
to
it
be
was
it was going to be Paul.
FPW one particularly. Yeah,
Well, at FPW, that it was Insidious, and then we brought Sacrilege in, which everybody knows is Z, and then Paul was going to be the leader, and then of course that kind of got thrown to the wayside, when everything happened, and then we decided that we were going to redo it when Z come in and actually put was being Sacrilege, got her into that storyline with Emma that you helped film some of the stuff of, and that was actually going to lead into me being pushed over the edge of bringing the new and improved and make it over Insidious back,
Well, the
and
whole
then
idea
Paul was like,
was I was going to be the voice in Emma's head.
right.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So Emma, the whole heel turn, we come up with that idea when Emma told us that she was going to do the heel turn. It's like, hey, why can't we do this? Because we're going to have fun with it, but at the same time, we kind of thought, be a little kooky, and we kind of thought like the Munsters, because you got Paul that would be going into his normal quote unquote almost cult type thing. You had the two monsters in Insidious and Sacrilege, and then you had the human in Emma.
Yeah.
So we were going to try to put together to give the monster vibe, but it was still going to be badass wrestling.
Emma has had
So
the perfect opportunity now, really, because we've both gone to LPW, or rather Emma has. I've gone there with her to make her videos and stuff. Um, and Emma can Emma is now a heel, of course, but Emma can completely start from scratch. Anything that we did in OEW to build Emma up, like the voices and whatever, it doesn't matter now. Emma's just as far, and most of them, because they're furry wrestlers, I've never even seen Emma in other feds. Really, in a way, it's ideal because Emma can just it's the slate has been wiped clean now. So it's in a way, it's made it easier for Emma to to just start again. Basically, they've never seen face Emma, so. But yeah, it would have been cool to have seen it in REW. But yeah, stuff happens. 4 years was fantastic,
Yep.
really, because we had we had our problems. We had people leaving, messing around, but it's just like it's not exclusive to REW. I mean, you get that used to it in the finish that you don't even think anything of it, and half of the time you don't. Unless you're the owner or the person causing problems, you don't even know what's happening anyway. Quite
Oh, it's
honestly,
it's more. I mean, like this is one of the reasons why we started doing this podcast. It's like you want to. There's a lot of things that go into making a show. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of work that has to go in. Like Fire Ember spoke on it last week about the amount of like work that you really have to put in just to get a show on once a week. So, this is all a hobby to us. Like, all of us do this because we like to have fun, and then it's a hobby. So
it's supposed to be fun
right.
anyway.
You have your real life. It's hard just to take time out of your real life. Everybody's busy. You take time out of your real life to sit down and write out a show or write out a storyline or book a show. It takes a lot of time, and we want to put a lot of the spotlight onto that to let people know, like, look, don't take this for granted. You're in a wrestling place, but there's somebody behind that curtain that's putting all this together so you can actually do this, and it's a thankless job. You don't, we're not making millions of dollars doing this. We're not making really much anything doing this, so we do it because we love it. We have a passion for it.
I kind of think that, based on what you just said with putting a show on everything, I think we need to get a hold of Brittany, who was production over at OEW, and get her perspective on it with all the last minute changes sometimes and how things had to be put and having to keep up with, did this happen, did that happen, and people forgetting to, oh, by the way, this is supposed to happen.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to get somebody needs to reach out and get in touch with Brittany, and we'll send her over an email questionnaire because I know she's one of those that doesn't voice. But maybe get her perspective on it.
Yeah, definitely. Any last words, Casey? Tell us what you're doing now. Like, what are you like? Just going around, just filling Emma's matches?
No, I was just going to say what, in a way, apart from what I did, I put all this stuff on my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel was never monetized. It was never my intention to do anything like that. I don't think that I should. It's other people's work. I was just standing there recording it. So I never intended to make. There was never any plan. It just began as recording Emma's matches, and we went full circle to where I was probably recording 2 feds a week, and now we've gone back to the beginning again, where I'm just recording Emma's matches, and I'll carry on doing that.
Well, speaking of full circle, KC or BK, let me tell you the story real quick before we let. And so everybody knows I'm back in Premier Wrestling. All right, so I was going to be appearing on the Friday before the show Full Circle. So I'm online, and one morning I see KC, and I'm like, "Hey, KC, you might want to check out Premiere today, 4 p.m. SLT or 1 p.m. SLT." He's like, "Why? Is somebody going to be there?" I don't know. You might want to check it out. And I sent him a ticket over.
That kind of falls back to where when I friended him and he was letting and he was kind of like, I'm not sure why he's doing that, and of course you covered, he probably got the.
He's an asshole. He's an asshole. I don't give a shit.
Right, exactly. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, and I said to Paul, knowing that you were friends, and I said, is BK going to be there as well? And Paul says to me, I don't think BK isn't going to be there after the way you left or something like that. And
no, wait, are we talking about? Are we talking about with PW right now, or are we talking about the OEW?
Premier. No, I'm talking about Premier.
I didn't want to let him down. I didn't want to let him down and be like, So
well, if you listen to the last episode when Nimber was on here, I read and signed off my contract, so I will be a part of AVW. I'm going to be a commentator for them.
Right. Yeah.
All right.
I remember say that. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I just wanted to say one thing at the finish.
Go ahead.
I tried to get along with everybody over the years. Some people in second line wrestling, you know, we know they can be pains in the ass. They can be difficult. They may be in second line wrestling because, well, it's an escape, and they don't deal with real life so well. I mean, I'm not particularly the most talkative, although you wouldn't probably know today. But
I was
you
going
know,
to say, now wait a minute.
but it was a place where I met. I mean, it was I can't say anything bad about Second Life either because it was a place where I met my best friend Emma.
That's
So
good.
you know, it's basically a good thing. But
Well,
what
I
I'd
can't
like
say
to
too much.
what
I
I'd like
can't say
what
anything
I'd
bad
like
about
to
Second
think
Life.
what I'd like to think is that I left something, whatever happens in the future, I would like to think that I left something behind on YouTube that will stay there. I hope it will bring pleasure to the people who were in the videos and show the work that they put in and give them something to go back and look at one day. And I hope I left it well and that I didn't have a problem with anybody. You know, I mean, I had a few words with Heather in OEW, but we finished well, we finished great. And I don't think there's anybody left now that, you know, I had a problem with because I basically didn't have to have a problem with anybody because I didn't wrestle. I didn't want any title or anything like that. There was no conflict. That's why it was, if anything, stress free. I just stood there and did my job basically. So I probably got more fun out of it than a lot of people, basically, because there was no aggravation or very very little. So
That's good to hear.
I'm just thankful to just go and watch Emma wrestle again and watch the show and everything. And one match a week is enough, quite honestly.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I'm
I'm going to
go
be
on.
quite honest. We know with the years you've been around, there's more stories that you can tell, and there's just no way that we're going to be able to wrap all of it up in one
No,
episode. So we will keep
no,
it
I'm not.
open that we're going to bring you back, and then that way you can tell some more stories that we may
Oh God.
not know about. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, today's podcast is sponsored by Premier Wrestling, and I'm not going to lie to you, we don't have anything written out for them. We're trying to work on that because we are still growing as this is being done. But Premier Wrestling, sponsor of the Fourth Wall with Paul and BK, and I do know they have a website, so you can go and check everything out where they have their events and when their shows are going on. Paul, what do you have?
You basically said everything. Make sure you click subscribe. Make sure you join our Discord. If you enjoy our shows, if you want to be a guest, hit either BKI or Z up, and that's about it.
Well, yeah, don't
And I
forget now we just recently we do have an X account now, and if you go to the description at where the page is itself, they have the links in there, so you guys have a way to get in touch with us. And we are trying to reach. We're very realistic. We are trying to reach 50 subscribers. It's SL. We understand it's a very cornered market that we're going after, but there should be enough people around. So come on, like, share, subscribe, do whatever you can, but we're just trying to reach 50 subscribers. I think if we reach 50, I think we're doing pretty good.
Yeah, we'll be all
and I,
right. And then BK will be starting at AVW. I'll be starting in Premiere on Attitude coming up in the new year. So we got a lot of stuff ahead of us, BK.
Oh, and Paul. I don't know if you're aware of this, but you kind of snuck Fire and KC in on me. I actually have something working for next week where there's possible. I know we're going to have one guest. There's a possibility we're going to have two guests here next week, and you're not going to know who it is. You're not going to know who it is until they get here.
Oh, wow. Well,
I've already got it in the works.
All right, let's find out next week. All right, so again, click subscribe, join our Discord page, follow us on Twitter. We'll see you next week. Casey King, thank you again. Everybody check out Casey King's YouTube page. We'll put it on the description. And everybody have a good week.
I'd just like to say one final thing. Thank you both for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you,
Really
Casey.
enjoyed it.
Thank you for everything
Thank you
you
for
did
coming.
and have done.
Thank you very much.